Welcome back to Often Wrong. Today, for episode 11, we are talking about our obsession with binaries. Are things black and white? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they right or are they wrong? We're going to dig into the history of it, the meaning of it all, and what we can do to defeat the binaries. Also, special guest, there might have been an earthquake in Los Angeles and a subsequent tree rave that happened on Claire's side of the screen. So, hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Hey listeners, thank you so much for joining us again for this episode of Often Wrong. If you are enjoying how this season is rolling out, you can engage further by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment on wherever you listen to your podcast or on our website at carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong. From all of us at Often Wrong, thank you so much, and let's get back into the show. Hi everybody, welcome back to Often Wrong. Today, we are at episode 11. And you know what? The only 720,000 of the many podcasts make it past 10 episodes. So, and also I read if we make it to 21, we'll be in the top 1%, which is so elite. And I'm really looking forward to that. So that's just a note to the audience. Stick around. We got 25 episodes in this first season and so much more to talk about. I also think we get better every time. And if you ever notice that we didn't get better, like if today's episode isn't better than last week's episode, that was just a test. And you passed because you noticed. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
Something to say there. But today we're talking about our obsession with binaries. You know, this is something that shapes how we see the world, but we rarely question it. Whether that's from gender or politics or race and personality types, we just love sorting things into neat little boxes. You know, it's all black or white, it's good or bad, it's right or wrong. But in the real world, it is much messier than that. So I totally understand the urge to categorize everything. But as a person that often fucks around and finds out, it doesn't help. It is not useful. This is a messy world. So why do we cling to these categories? Do they help us make sense of things or do they just limit our thinking? Today, we're going to break it down with some history, some psychology, and some real world impact. So let's get into it.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this today. This has been my soapbox for a long time. Yeah. And I think, you know, when I was preparing for this episode, I was like, fuck a binary. And then I'm excited to get into, wait, do binaries actually matter and are they important? And yeah, we're going to talk about a lot today. I think it's very exciting. So I think a good first place to start is defining the binary.
Yeah. Yes. Actually, a better first place to start is I'm Lisa Nwankwo, and that's my co-host. Her name's Claire Cornetta.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
That's us. We're here.
That's us. Also, okay, the 720,000 statistic is crazy, but also I don't think it's that compelling because that sounds like a fuck ton of podcasts.
I know, but there's at least 5 billion. So
that's facts, guys. That's just facts.
And that was just kind of like a precursor to the next thing, which is like when we get to episode 21, we'll be in the 1%. I've always wanted to be in the 1%. So
it's really exciting.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah. You're definitely in the 1% of something.
I don't know what it is.
I mean, top lesbians in Mexico City.
Definitely top 1% of Lisas in the world.
Definitely top 1% of Lisas.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think you're doing well. I think you're doing well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome. Okay. What was number 2? What were you going to say?
Number 2 is, what you wanted to start this conversation off with besides our names. Yeah.
Great. Defining the binary thinking. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, I think this is a moment to be like, okay, should we go way deeper than what we think about the binary? Like, what is a binary? It's two things. It's either or. It's a system of thought where things are reduced to one of two things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a pretty simple definition. People understand what that is. People might not understand why we're trying to deconstruct it because, you know, okay, it's very normalized. It's very there. But I think where we're coming from here is that Binaries are very limiting, as you said in your intro. They are very limiting. They don't leave much room for nuance, for questions, for gray area. I think,
And that's
still
our whole thing is nuance and gray areas.
that's
It's the
everything.
best part.
That's the best part. And it's where you actually have real conversation. And so this is an exciting thing to start to go into basically, in how we talk about things, but how we think about things and interact with our surroundings and all of it. So, some examples you've already indicated: gender, male, female; politics, left, right; climate, believer, denier, like pick one. And, if you have questions, no, pick one. Sexuality, straight, gay; I'm a living in betweener. So, it's really just, this framework is not much of a framework. It's a pick one. And it's it really punishes complexity in many ways and reinforces, like we've said, the silos of power by demanding that we pick one thing and center our energy and, input into one of two things. So,
Totally agreed. But, I think it's really interesting because even just in those examples, I know, like for me, I also think it's true for you too. Like politics, I wouldn't consider myself left or right. And I definitely wouldn't consider myself a centrist. So
yeah.
it's like it doesn't even exist
Yep.
on this little
Yeah. Yep.
quote unquote little tiny spectrum that
Yeah.
exists and is available. I'm just like, oh, I don't feel resonant
Yeah.
with any of these
Yeah.
categories.
We
And
should
then
definitely
honestly,
talk
the
about
same thing with
spectrums.
like sexuality, huge one, where like I'm an identified lesbian, I'm a married lesbian, but I also have always known I'm probably pansexual, but it's not super relevant. And I bring up these things at different times when it's relevant, but it isn't always. And sometimes it's like it's not important to me to say like,
Yeah.
hi, I'm this way, when it's like, well, I'm in a lesbian monogamous marriage, so
Yeah.
that's what it
Yep.
is. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also, that's beautiful. And I just have to say, I trust pansexuals with the world. And if that is what's in your heart one day, and wonderful, love it. All my favorite people are pan. The again, I am sadly bisexual, and I can. It's like, just the difference is just something I know, and in my heart, why I don't identify as pan, but I just don't. Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But I
well, they're
think
like two different things too. It's
they
like
are.
this is open for interpretation if I were in different circumstances in my life,
Yeah,
but I'm not, so
yeah. And
it doesn't matter.
going back to the binaries, binaries also, we get into the label aspect of it, right? It's not just only two sides of this exists. It's also a pick what you want to be labeled as, and it leaves no room for fluidity, which, if there's one thing we can say, is beliefs, sexuality, gender, everything in this world is fluid. And to me, that again is where binaries just force us to remain siloed.
Right.
And we shouldn't have to do that. So today we're going to talk about where binaries come from, what binaries do to us. Do they have objective value? And then talking about, okay, outside of binaries, what does the world look like? And what's the wisdom there? So I think we should start with where binaries come from, which sounds
I'd
like
love
where
to.
babies come from.
Yeah.
But I think in many cases, binaries are very culturally constructed, but they feel very natural because they're so embedded in a few key aspects of society, but namely, language is a huge one. We have a lot of binaries in language. And I even think about, yes, like gender binaries and whatnot, but even like the romance languages that have feminine or masculine nouns, etc., adjectives that we don't have that in English. But it's it reinforces the two-sidedness of it. I think it can be very limiting when you don't have the language to further interact with your surroundings, and when you have a language that enforces binaries, it just makes it feel really normal. We have a lot of binaries in our legal system and the way that we've constructed society, which makes sense again from an organizational standpoint. I understand why we're here, and I think we're just in a moment where we can say, hey, like let's have some gray area. But things like, for example, citizenship, immigration status, there's a whole bunch of gray. It's not black and white. There's a lot of in between, green cards, visas, etc. And I'm speaking particularly in the US. So it's not always legal, but a lot of times the law has been defined by two sides and two things.
Yeah.
I think going back to our conversations about religion, good versus evil is a very key theme in binaries. What that looks like and how that underpins society, I think cannot be overstated, because it's like, oh, is that person evil or are they good? Oh, maybe they're a good person doing something evil, or maybe like, and again, we get kind of caught up in the labels of it all, but that fundamental binary of good versus evil, I think is very much there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have
Definitely.
anything to add to this list?
Honestly, no, but this is making me think of one of my most long term therapists. This was like 10 years ago. When I went there, she used to always say, like, she would always say that I had black and white thinking. And I thought that
Mm,
was so interesting because I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. I could not
mm,
comprehend. So what you're saying about how it's so embedded, I was like,
yeah.
well, what else could it be? And I would come in and I'd be like, well, this happened. And then I did this. Was that good or bad? And she was like, well, how might it be both? And I was like, I don't know. Give me the answer. You are
Yeah.
the therapist. Tell me if I'm good or not. And it took a couple of years for it to click and be like, oh, it's both. Things are
Totally.
nuanced. So I think that's like a really good thing that comes up in like your personal work all the time about, is it black or white? Is it good or bad? And it's really usually both. And
Yes.
that is so hard to grasp in
Yes.
every iteration of thought about it.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think another binary that has plagued me, it wasn't the black or white, it was all or nothing. So
Yes,
that
totally.
and but I very much felt it's not the concept of all or nothing that is wrong. It was that I was practicing that because I thought I either had to be all in on something or I just wouldn't do it. So like,
Totally.
again, that's a therapy thing, but like if I was going to start working out or whatever, I had to be 6 days a week in the gym doing, whatever perfectly. I had to do it all full way. It would never have occurred to me to just do like, oh, if I get 2 workouts, maybe I'll just move my body. That's like,
Yeah.
it's either that or full couch potato.
Hmm.
And I've largely grown out of that
But that's hard.
mindset, but it's hard. And the all or nothing thing, I think, is something that it's rewarded in many cases, but it's very unlivable. It's a very
Mm,
difficult state of mind to be in constantly. And like,
totally.
I there are aspects of like my work, our work that I love and I'm all in on. And you start to just be like, okay, well, it doesn't have to be all in 100% of the time on every single thing. Let's like slow down a smidge and look around and just take a moment. So, I think the way of thinking, the binary way of thinking is very efficient,
Hmm.
and that's part of the problem. It flattens our reality into something that's really digestible, but it's not honest. We're not being realistic about it. And
Yeah.
so, and engaging again with the nuance of it. Um, I think, there's a concept in Jungian psychology from Carl Jung, who he coined the term enantiodromia. enantiodromia. Yeah. And that kind of means or not kind of means, he has said it to mean the emergence of the unconscious opposite in the course of time. So it's kind of the shifting from one binary to another, one opposite to another over time. And again, this is something we see in psychology, society, etc. So I think in that idea, that core idea, and I don't think we need to engage too much with the psychology since neither of us have degrees in psychology. But although I did take Psych 101, so maybe I am qualified. But I think it can't be overstated how much this is fundamental to the way that we think and the way that our society is structured.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's also really interesting too. This is one thing that, I mean, serves the purpose of our entire podcast overall, but maybe isn't about this topic. But in a conversation with Jessica Dorr, who was our first guest on this podcast, and she is a licensed social worker, we had this conversation years ago that I think about all the time. And it's like how the DSM and all psychological terms were created by people doing research, and it is based off of the words of people. So all of your thoughts are being now translated and re-represented in psychological speak, but it is actually yours. So we are technically qualified to talk about psychology because it is about our own brains. But
I love that.
we won't. But
Thank you. Yeah, we
thought I'd say
won't,
that.
but we can. We can, but we won't. We could. Wait for it. We will at some point, I'm sure.
I know a lot.
Yeah.
About my own brain.
Yeah, about my own brain too. Lived experience is the number one, I'm telling you. That's the best data right there. So I think we can get into what binaries look like and what they do to us in our current world. And if there's harm done, where it's done, etc. So let's look at an individual level first, I think, because we've already talked about a little bit in queer spaces what the binaries do and how limiting they are. I mean, even if you think, for example, with sexuality, like the Kinsey scale, Kinsey 6 versus Kinsey 1, Kinsey 6 gay, which is still kind of like, have I taken a couple quizzes and been like,
so many,
yes. However, it's reductive, for sure, reductive at this point, to me at least. Yeah. And I still feel like when we frame things as a spectrum, it's still a binary. It's still one to two things, and you're either teetering towards one or the other, and it's problematic. So, and I don't mean problematic in the problematic sense. I mean in the limiting sense. It's very limiting. And anyone who operates outside of that is kind of punished for not fitting into a category. And they're told to pick a side, pick a gender, pick a lover, or pick a lover's gender, I guess. Pick one and stay there, because people want to define you. And when we think so much about the world in binaries, and that's the only way that people can think about things, that's why they want you there too, so they can understand you and they can contextualize your existence in their understanding.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think for me, as far as it goes with like sexuality, political affiliations, etc., I remember I was definitely that person. I took every BuzzFeed quiz that existed. Totally. Am I more of a Carrie or am I Miranda? It changed all the time. Also, like, am I gay or am I straight or am I bi or what am I?
Yeah.
And also, like, yeah, I'm a liberal. No, I'm a leftist. Wait, no, I'm something else. And so I just think it's really interesting, and I think it can be helpful. It helps you, I think, especially as a young person, in like defining yourself and kind of like orienting yourself towards things. But I think it's only really useful if you can arrive there and let that be the jumping off point and not the ending point.
Well said. Yeah, I think that's huge. And I want to go back to the political aspect of this, because it's actually, I think, one of the most harmful parts of how our society is structured, the political binary, from left and right. And, I'm a registered independent. I have never comfortably fit on either side. And again, I have never comfortably fit in the sides of it all, anyways, because it's not that I'm closer to one on a spectrum, it's that I don't like the spectrum. It's
Yeah.
stupid.
For real.
And some people there are good ideas and terrible ideas on both sides. And
Absolutely.
we're forced to pick, and we're forced to go, oh, okay, well, I guess being in the center makes me a little closer to both. So, okay, I get that. And, I want, like, I don't think people are actually, I mean, sure, there are actual centrists and great, understand, whatever. But like, I think it's just the people want to be proximate to both ideologies and not be pigeonholed into one. So,
And they're impossible choices. Like whenever I hear someone say like, I'm socially liberal, fiscally conservative. What does that mean?
yeah. What does
Those
that
things
mean?
don't even really go together. Like I
No,
mean, they
they don't.
could if we had a different spectrum and a different set of things, but it's just like
Yeah.
those two things like don't make sense. They can't.
Correct.
Based on
Yep.
the current spectrum, it doesn't really make sense.
Right. It doesn't. But for me, I'll give an example. I don't believe in the estate tax. It's double taxation. Because if you've already paid taxes on your income, you should not have to pay taxes when you die, on that money that was already taxed once. And but like, I also believe in comprehensive tax reform that enables us to get the funds that we need for the public good. Like, and state level taxes, usually great, depending on the state, usually great. So I don't agree with how either side approaches taxes. It's
Yeah.
very like, cut the numbers. And it's like, well, what? And then you're cutting the numbers, but then you're making all these loopholes. Okay. No. But then you're going to hike up taxes and increase spending and do all this crazy stuff. So it's like, it's bad on both sides. And I have just felt really constricted by, being forced to lean towards one or the other, because I just think the whole thing needs to be reevaluated. And
Totally. Yeah.
yeah. So my point here is, as an individual, I find it very frustrating. As a member of society, it truly pains me to see what's unfolding, because when we have these binaries that people are forced to pick between, that's when you get the rise of these extremist views on either side, that it's like, and like, when I say extremist, I mean, it's charged with hatred in some
Yes.
capacity, and it's charged with fear in a lot of ways. And people are it starts to like rise out from a counterpoint, because we're forcing people to pick, and then the silos are just going to grow taller. It's really harmful to a young society, which again, we've established that the United States is.
Little babies. Well,
Little babies.
honestly, this is making me think of one of the binaries that has deeply, deeply impacted my life. And it was one of my biggest struggles as a child. So that's about race. And my mom is white, is a white American. My dad is black and from Nigeria. Growing up, because my dad's from Nigeria, I don't think he necessarily had the language to talk to me about race. I think he was being introduced to it basically because most people are black in Nigeria. And so I'm sitting there in third grade doing standardized tests, and you have to check off a box of if you're black or white. And I was like, I don't know. I'm so confused because I don't want to pick one of these because I look black, but my mom, that's not nice. I don't want to not write white. And so it's just like things like that where it's so confusing and you have to ascribe to this thing. And then even after that, when it was like, okay, no, I'm black, I identify as black. Then you start to have these things where it's like, well, you're not really black and you have a white mom. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. And then then there'll be things like, well, they're one drop rule, so you're definitely black. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. And it's just like so confusing and goes back and forth. And it's like, these are things that were put on me and given to me to select. And it also, when they're given to you in that way, then it becomes this whole long, or for me, it became this like decade long process of me waiting for other people to tell me what I was.
Mm.
And that is crazy. And now I'm just like, I don't care what you think about what I am because this is all bullshit anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just like such a thing that I had to deal with so much as a child, and no one would explain it to me because it's not real. So it's like, and even like learning things
100%.
about like how Irish people used to be black and Italians were black, and like based on like the census for a while. And it's just like, oh, we are given these choices and they're not true
Yeah.
and they're not super representative. And that's like a whole other can of worms. But it's really just like a binary that is placed, and it's like, oh, are you this or are you that? And it's like, well, how much does this matter actually?
100%. And thank you for sharing that, because the white versus non-white of everything, like, yes, there's a time and a place to like discuss that, I think, in like certain things, but you're right. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit and it's all fabricated. You, as a little baby child, being forced to pick one and then going through the experience that I know a lot of multiracial people experience, which is you're not black enough, you're not white enough, you're not fitting comfortably in either of these things. It's similar, I imagine, to, immigrants who are like, well, you're not fully American. And you're not fully Korean. Like, where are you?
Yeah.
You're this third culture. And again, I think the third option being representative as not just a third thing, it's not just one other thing, but it's this like expansive, open, viewpoint of being like, oh, there's more to this. There's more to this than just black or white. Like,
Literally through college, I had friends who would say to me, "You're the whitest black person I know," or "You're the blackest white person I know," and they would interchangeably, or they say them at the same time. They'd be like, "Yeah, you're the blackest white person I know, and the whitest black person I know," and I would be like, "What does one respond to that with? And also, why did you say that? For what? What is the purpose of this? What do we do besides it being, you know, deeply racist? It's also like, what are we supposed to do with this now?"
and I'll just add my psychoanalysis, because I've
Yeah.
already referenced Carl Jung, so I'm
Yes.
again qualified to do this.
Mhm.
They were just trying to figure you out. For them,
Literally.
had literally nothing to do with you or your
Mhm.
existence. They just wanted to be able to understand you
Right.
and put you in whatever box made them comfortable and
Mhm.
made it so that they could understand. Like,
Right. And
it's crazy. Yeah.
it's just such a good example of erased nuance because these were my
Yes.
friends. These are people that wanted to be around me and wanted to know me, and they were doing their best, and that's what they came up with, which is
Yeah.
deeply unfortunate. But it is
Yes.
has just really smoothed out this very rich, fertile soil of
Totally.
information about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, to go back to the whiteness of it all as well, like, there's a lot of, I've heard a lot of emphasis on, like, you mentioned the Italian thing, people being like, and I'm Italian, I am white, obviously. But I don't know if you've ever seen Sicilian people, like, in Sicily, they're not white. Like, what do you mean white? Like, okay. I don't know what you entirely mean by white, because there are parts of white America where those folks would be highly discriminated against. So, like,
Literally.
it's what are we calling white? Like, it's
That's the thing. That's the exciting thing about this conversation. It's a timely time to have this conversation about obsession with binaries because we're seeing the wheels fall off them
yes.
really rapidly as we try to, as like the definitions of things change and people try to cling to these definitions. And it's like, nope, it's not true
Mhm.
anymore. You're not that anymore. And it's like, oh my God, no, like
Yeah.
it just falls apart.
It's exhausting. It's exhausting to see, like, how, yeah, it is really quickly falling apart. and we've hitched our wagon to these notions that are really unstable. Like
Hmm.
if we had just better understandings of our surroundings and related to things better, I would argue it wouldn't be this easy to destabilize everything. I think it
Maybe,
would be, yeah, maybe,
maybe so.
yeah, maybe it would be a little bit harder. Um, but
But it's
I,
also a
yeah,
thing that I've noticed, like, especially like in my circles, if you're talking about activism of any kind, where it's like, oh, I am this, and I'm a lesbian speaking on behalf of the queer community, then it's like, well, you're this kind of lesbian, so that
yeah,
doesn't really work, and it starts to really split apart the things that we need to get us out of this.
yes, definitely. Yeah. I it's again, I think that goes back to the silos, right? Like it
Hmm.
just separates us. And
It divides your collectives.
yes, 100% it divides the collectives and the collective consciousness. Like, especially, yeah. And I keep going, I guess, back to this idea of binaries and labels and how like binaries exist without labels. Labels, I don't know if they fully exist without the binary to go off of.
Ooh,
And
that's
like
hard.
labels give voice to the binary,
Hmm.
right? Like they just, it allows people, and language that separates, that divides, really just reinforces these things. And, I'm not always saying that it's right or wrong to frame things in a binary way. But like, I think about, okay, if we're talking about like in activist circles and how things come together, how movements come together, etc. I think I've mentioned this before, and this is a pet peeve of mine, which is that, and in our work we have to design calls to action a lot of times. Calls to action are inherently reductive. That is the nature of a call to action. It is like it's one thing, it's a catchy thing. You want people to catch on to it. You want people to feel motivated and to do something with it. I feel very salty about how we think about calls to action
Mm.
because I think they're extremely polarizing and I think they just do a really bad job of getting people to actually understand what you're trying to do if it's too big and it's too, you know, too
Do you have an
much.
example?
I do. And I'm curious if this is a controversial take, but defund the police is a very like handy CTA that we've heard a lot. It has been grabbed by folks on the right to be like, oh my God. And people on the left don't understand it either. So the defund the police call to action, which it's not really a call to action. I was actually talking about this with my friend Emma, our friend Emma, who was like, it's not actionable for an individual. I can't defund the police. Like, what are we really trying to do here? But the defund the police, like, terminology is so reductive because the people who created it were not actually saying take away all police funding. It was reallocate and expand what community safety looks like and how we better protect our community and engage on behalf of the community. So it's not expanding funding to like get more guns on the street. It's not, but it's like, oh, expanding, bringing social workers in and, spreading the wealth around a little bit and making policing, or, I think of it more as like community safety, really personalized to the community and expanding what that looks like, not just defund the police. Because the time that again was repopularized in the last few years, crime rates in major cities are very, very high. And it was particularly, I was living in Denver at the time. I mean, the crime rates in Denver are terrible. I had my car stolen. Like, I understand why people are like, what do you mean defund the police? Like, our police are already like actually and this isn't the police, this was the justice system. In Colorado, they stopped prosecuting car theft. Grand Theft Auto, they stopped prosecuting it. And they announced it. So people were just like, "Oh, I have impunity here. Like that I can just go steal cars." They like it
That's
was
a
nuts.
great. I'm glad that you use that
Yeah.
example because I think that works perfectly for this episode.
Yeah.
I have always been, not always, but since I read about it in probably 2016, a big supporter of the defund the police movement. And I think that the things that you're mentioning about people just not understanding it, it was because defund the police is a action and movement that existed outside of this binary, and people could not understand that there would be any nuance to it.
Yes.
And of course there was. So they couldn't really go together. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it or you shouldn't
Right.
advocate for this thing, but it's like it couldn't really fit into the way that most people were seeing the world. And
Yes.
then on top of that, after this whole movement to defund the police, and that became, in popular lexicon, then we saw police departments who would willfully ignore crime and allow things to rise. And there was like, I think I was in Oakland and I was walking past the police station, which was boarded up. It was so silly that for also the Oakland Police Department looks like the home of Batman. It is the most insane building I've ever seen. Very scary, very sinister. But it was all boarded up. And the sign on the door of the police department was like, sorry, we've been defunded. We can't do all these things. That's not true. They were not defunded. Their budget was
No.
actually increased at that
Yeah.
year, but because all people had heard, people aren't checking the budget of the police. So they were
Correct.
like, yeah, you think we were defunded. So we're going to tell you that this is your neighbor's fault for doing this.
Yep.
So it just, by setting this up in this binary system, it was easier for the state to respond and fight back in this way that was kind of completely at odds with what the argument was in the first place.
Yeah.
But it just couldn't fit because it was not a binaried response. It was a measured response and it was thoughtful and it involved a lot of different pieces. And I think, you need a catchy phrase for the protest, but
Yeah.
it was too much. People were not going to be like, well, what does this mean? Obviously, this doesn't mean
Right.
get rid of all of the police. Some people mean that, but not most
Right.
people.
Right.
And yeah, it just was a disaster because of
Yes.
that. It couldn't fit.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for bringing that perspective and synthesizing it because, like, I think, again, it's exactly if we had non binary thinking and we could engage with it in a thoughtful way, great. Like, that's actually what it meant. The movement itself, again, a totally support, and it's really like really common sense. If you but if you approached it, it's like it's the lexicon. It's like, which is a pain in the ass. And look, you're never going to make everyone happy with something. Like what would my call to action would be? What would I have said? It would probably be like police reform now. Like, or reform policing or reform community safety, which none of which are catchy and they're all stupid. But like, and also I would be told in social impact circles, they're not specific enough. But I'm like, that's the point though. Like, I can't synthesize it in 4 words because
Maybe I would have said, rethink the police.
ooh, that's even better than mine.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at coming up with shit like that.
I think because that's really what it was like, okay,
Yes.
let's think about why this was created and what purposes it serves. And do we still have the same purposes? And do we still have the same
100%.
needs? And maybe we need to rework this a little bit. That's what defund the police means.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. But and so I guess in the way that I've looked at it, it seems like a very binary term for me. Like,
Are you at a
defund the
rave?
police. No, I know. It's my my son right now is going crazy, and I swear to God, it's the tree. It's the tree doing that. Yes, the
Okay.
tree is at a rave outside. Yeah, it's only going to get worse from here. I don't even.
It
think
looks so romantic.
it's very romantic over here. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought in that perspective because I think even me, who has engaged thoughtfully with the movement behind defunding the police, in my head it's all or nothing. In my head, defund the police is an all or nothing statement, and it brings me to one side. It's not like, oh, defund and reallocate. That didn't, when I hear those three words, it doesn't occur to me. And I'll blame social conditioning and growing up in
Fair
society
enough.
that enforces binaries on that. But like, I had a hard time engaging with that because I was like, what? And I knew what it meant, but I'm like, oh, I just wish it was, you know, rethink the police. I like
Yeah.
that so much more.
Honestly, I'm good. Movement
Yeah,
PR.
you're really good. I
Well, it's
think
honestly the same thing we've talked about before in previous episodes. I think this was about, maybe we talked about this in the revolution episode, or maybe we talked about it in all of the episodes. But just how, it's like if you think politically, like this from left to right, we agree on a lot of things, but we are not going to hear that in the discourse because we are positioned
totally.
to oppose each other. And that is something that I think we should start pushing back on. But I think that also brings up another question of beyond like what I was saying at the beginning, that it is a good jumping off point to help you kind of define your perspective and maybe not even define, but to just like navigate it. Are there other objective values to binaries?
Yes.
When are they used?
So, yeah, like, are they always harmful, or can they actually be helpful sometimes,
Yeah.
you think? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask. I think they can be useful as a shorthand, like for example, hot or cold or night or day, or turn the
Hmm.
light on or turn the light off. The world does exist in opposites at times, but it starts to become a problem, I think, when we treat binaries as like the full, complete truth instead of just like kind of temporary tools for understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think binaries can feel clarifying, especially in moments of like urgency or uncertainty. Like, am I safe? Am I unsafe? Like when you have to make a quick decision. But the danger is when we start to apply them to everything and, people, identities, beliefs, and pretend that that's the only reality. Pretend that that's it, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's where polarity comes in
Oh, I'm so
because
glad you're bringing this up.
there's a difference between binaries and polarity because binaries will say you need to pick a side. And polarity says these two forces are in relationship. They create movement, they create tension, they transform, and it's a spectrum, not a wall.
Oh,
Bars.
okay. I'm so glad you're bringing this up, but I have to say, and I've said this already, I hate spectrums. I think spectrums, they're obviously still linear, right? It's just two sides, one thing. And they imply that you're closer to one end or the other and still reinforce the binary just in a more subtle way. So like when I think about polarity, I don't think of a line, I think of a circle. And it's like a living dynamic system where everything is just in relationship and there's no better or worse or center or extreme. It's just interconnectedness, you know? And to me, and then we get that tension, right? If we
Yeah.
literally think about how the world is shaped, the Earth, that's our planet, I forget. It's there's tension there, the polar elements of it, which I just want to be clear, there is no North Pole. Is that right? There's not like an
Oh,
actual
I
like
don't know.
land mass called the North Pole.
I mean, I'm certain there is. I've seen many animated movies that say that there is, but I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure somebody said, LOL, they thought the North Pole was real. And I was like, yeah,
Listen,
no,
it's not the right time in
it's not the
history
right
for
time.
us to address this.
We're not geologists or cartographers. We don't need to be. But regardless, there is an energetic polar, you know, tension happening in Earth. And that's how everything is to me. That's how I think of everything.
I
Like,
love that.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's really special. It just, yeah, you don't have to be pulled one side to the other. You can kind of exist in the mix. It doesn't force resolution. It doesn't do anything. It's just tension and it
yeah.
exists and it can exist and it should. And that's how things move. And it's not really about choosing and holding your space. It's about being adjusted naturally by the tension of a polarity, which I feel like that was probably a hard to understand sentence, but I think it makes sense.
No, 100%. And again, it's if you want to think about like tension, and we're not saying in a bad way. We're
Mm-hmm.
saying in a interconnected, interdependent way.
Tension, like
And
how a pool will let you float on it.
yeah, surface tension.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just how things are connected. But yeah, the polarity acknowledging interdependence and interconnectedness. That's all it is. That's all the tension is. It's just how it's connected. And I think about this being just in relationship to other things. If I'm here, I'm in relationship with everything around me. I'm in relationship to ideas, to myself, to, all of these things. And instead of being somewhere on a spectrum, we're just in this little earth relating to each other, relating to different
Mm,
things. And
that's really nice.
to me, that's such a better way to engage with, especially ideas we don't agree with. It's not about centering yourself, it's about centering your relationship to things
Mm,
and trying to understand that better. So, like, binary thinking to me says pick a side or, you know, find where you are on this little spectrum, but really pick a side. And when you reframe it in the context of polarity, we say hold the tension, understand the tension, be in relationship to your surroundings. It allows for that fluidity and motion and emergent outcomes, like binaries freeze things in place. There's like an immobility in a binary, right? But polarity, it's all of it can happen in a sphere. It's all happening.
it allows polarity thinking versus binary thinking. It allows you to move where you can say, I'm this way. And in conversation, you could be like, oh, never mind. And that
Mm-hmm.
actually makes me, personally, for me, I feel so much better doing this
Totally.
now and not
Oh,
feeling like I have to hold the line on all of my identity markers all of the time. Like some of them are important and need to be held, but some of them don't. And it's so helpful. Actually, this is one thing because I was going to ask I was going to ask you for an example of how to replace binary thinking with more relational thinking and how to treat things as like as like a both and instead of like an either or. But I thought of one, so I'm going to say mine first. But I was thinking about this with social media. I've been having this conversation with people for a while. It's on my mind a lot. But I was talking about how to be good at social media
mm,
and not good like you get a lot of likes or you get a lot of followers, but good that you don't have anxiety when you post on social media. And one of the things is I start asking myself certain questions when I post. And one of them, I post something and I want to have anxiety about it. I have the urge to be anxious. And then I'll
mm,
be like, what are people going to say about this? Are they going to say that that picture is ugly or that it's cringy or that my thought was stupid? And then I just have to ask myself, does that matter? Is that
mm,
okay? Is it have to be like the hottest picture ever or like is it ugly? Like is it, what if it just exists? What if my face just exists and I took a picture of it and I posted it online? It doesn't mean anything. And I just feel like
mm.
that's like such a very tiny example, but it's big. It's a big deal where you
I
can
love that.
start just being like, how much do these things matter?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think that's a really good example. And I think I love that question about like replacing binary thinking with relational thinking. Like that to me reads good or bad. Is this a good picture to
Hmm.
post or a bad picture to post?
Right. But in this
And
context, does it matter?
does it matter? No. And the answer is no. And it's usually no when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
Um, unless you're thinking about posting uh, like a like a dick pic or something and you're a man, like just don't do that.
Objectively bad.
um yeah, bad. Objectively bad, yeah. But
For me, though, some people it might not be. So again, relational.
yeah, yeah, it just depends. If
I know
it's
some people who think that's good.
yeah, well, I mean, if it's a nice picture, I guess I guess I support it then, yeah. So no binaries here. But yeah, I think considering your surroundings, considering how you're engaging with it. I think that's a great example. I love that.
Thank you.
I think if we were to now say, okay, we've established binaries, polarity, what things can look like, how things are impacted by our binary approach, I want to bring back the idea of emergence, which I talked about last episode a lot.
Yes. Yeah, if you need a
And
definition, go to the end of last week's episode.
yes, end of last week's episode. And really, though, just bring back like principles of nature. And let me establish I I believe we are all nature. If you are alive, you are nature. And
So true.
we're nature. So, like, I'm not saying this in a separate way. I'm not saying, like, look at nature. I am nature, baby. So,
Yeah.
you know, just hang tight. But, you know, nature doesn't do binaries, it does complexity, it does ecosystems, overlapping, interdependent, cyclical, beautiful, you know, mycelial networks of things, of information, of energy, of all of it. And everything is connected. And so to try and say that we have things on the outside of like, oh, it's one of two things, and then it's a line between the middle of them is not complete. It's really reductive. And if we're trying to engage more thoughtfully in our surroundings and with other people, with ideas, with, you know, media, we need to expand what that looks like and understand the interconnectedness of it all. And I think the principles of nature, I, for one, think of Barry Commoner's rules of ecology, and he did a comparison of the 4 rules of ecology versus the 4 rules of capitalism, and not really versus, but like putting them in conversation with each other. And one of those rules is that everything is connected in ecology. Everything is connected. You know, we know that, and it's things exist in this way. So I think that's incredibly important as an antidote to binaries, as a way to look at where we can draw wisdom from and, you know, how we move forward with this. And I also always think of like indigenous frameworks and, you know, identity, responsibility, relationships, etc. They exist in circles, and that's like the spherical, the circular, all of that. That is deeply rooted in indigenous ways of thinking and ways of relating to things. It's much better than things just being boxed off or, you know, siloed or placed on either end of a spectrum. So, yeah, I think to me, these are all antidotes to the way that we can relate to it better.
I love that. I think so beautifully put. Also, I love the thought of, you know, yeah, queerness being anti-binary. I love the thought of it being threatening. I love being threatening inherently. And I
I
think
love that.
to systems that we don't like, that really fuels my day. So
Fuels my fire. Agreed. So much.
beautifully put.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think we've been conditioned to choose sides, to pick a lane, to define ourselves against an opposite. And, you know, what if that's not the only or even the most honest way to exist? What if instead of a spectrum, we imagined the sphere, we imagined the circle, a system of relationships, not rankings, not labels, just interrelated, interconnected relationships.
Literally, what if? Because, you know, maybe it's not even about finding the right side, and it's just about learning how to sit with that tension, be in the motion of it all, the space in between, and letting connection and transformation and emergence live and happen, and let that inform our lives instead of trying to, the point of your life is not to define everything, it's to live it. And that's maybe a binary is a way that lets us not do that as much as
Beautifully
we
said.
are naturally born to do.
Beautifully said. And I guess, are we obsessed with binaries? We have a podcast called Often Wrong. Right or wrong is a binary. But the whole point of this is to be in the, fuck all middle of it. So
Yeah, and it's also to pick something that will just get people going, because we know it's not true. Do I think that I'm often wrong? No.
yeah,
Am I
I,
often right though? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
We're here. The most
Um,
important thing is that we're talking about it, and that's what we're doing. So far, we haven't really gotten anything from anyone that is saying that we are like dead wrong.
mhm.
So love that for us.
I think we will as we grow our audience.
Or maybe
But
not.
maybe not. Maybe
We'll
not. Maybe
see.
we're just right. But also, we're framing things because we're in relationship to these things.
Yeah,
We're not trying
definitely.
to define these things
And
necessarily, even though we
and I
usually
think
start with a dictionary definition.
literally,
Aside
but
from
that's
that.
just, to help us jump off, because we know as people who work in social impact that these kind of like broader ways to think about things are super relevant to the ways that we move within the world, at least professionally. So I know that for a lot of people that might not be true. So just
Yeah.
trying to give a precursor and explain kind of the big scaffolding of the world that we live in, and then kind of digging into it deeper. So
Yeah.
let us know if that's helpful for you. If there's something more you want to know, if you need more information, if you want more examples, we can do that for you, because this is for you. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thanks for listening. And, we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, don't pick a side. Be in relationship to your surroundings and your ideas and the ideas around you, and ask better questions. Don't pick a side.
Absolutely. All right. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Often Wrong is produced by Lisa Nwankwo, Claire Cornetta, and Joe Abdella. This episode was shot and edited by Joe Abdella. Special thanks to Michael Drummonds. Often Wrong is a Carrot Impact podcast. Go to carrotimpact.com/oftenwrong to learn more.